It's the spring of 1945. Picture yourself an American intelligence officer in the ruins of Germany. You're following a lead, not for gold, but for something far more valuable. Deep inside an abandoned salt mine in the Harz Mountains. And there, instead of treasure, you find stacks of engineering documents. Blueprints for the V-2 rocket, the weapon that had rained terror on London. But the papers are just a map. The real prize is the list of names attached, the scientists who designed it. A top-secret directive flashes from headquarters. Find these men before the Soviets do. There is just one problem. Their official files are a sea of swastikas and SS ranks. So a plan is hatched. A simple, almost laughably mundane solution to a horrifying moral problem. A single metal paperclip attaches a new, clean summary to the front of the file, hiding the inconvenient truths underneath. And just like that, a nation's sins are buried, and Operation Paperclip is born. That wasn't a movie scene. Between 1945 and 1959, a secret U.S. intelligence program called Operation Paperclip brought over 1,600 German scientists, engineers, and technicians to America.
And let's be clear, we're not talking about a few reluctant participants. A huge number of them were dedicated members of the Nazi Party, and many were directly complicit in war crimes.
So, not just the guys who worked the cash register at the Nazi gift shop. These were the headliners.
Exactly. And the star recruit, the man they wanted more than anyone, was Wernher von Braun. He was the mind behind the V-2 rocket that terrorized London. And he would become the mind behind the Saturn V rocket that put a man on the moon. This is the story of that deal. To understand why, you have to go back to the final days of World War II. The program started as Operation Overcast. The mission, run by the new Joint Intelligence Objectives Agency, was simple.
Simple and ruthless. It was a twofold strategy. First, grab all the German scientific know-how for the American military before anyone else could.
And second, make sure the other kid on the playground, in this case the Soviet Union, didn't get any of the cool world-ending toys.
And this wasn't just paranoia. The Soviets had their own version, Operation Ozoaviakim. On a single night, October 22, 1946, they rounded up and relocated over 2,200 German specialists.
This was a land grab for intellectual property. The US saw it as a zero-sum game. Every scientist working for the Soviets was a direct loss to American security.
It's the world's most messed up fantasy football draft. With the first pick, the Soviet Union selects the guy who almost blew up London.
That pressure led directly to President Truman. On September 3, 1946, he signed a secret directive that officially greenlit and expanded the program. It was at this point that it got its now infamous name, Operation Paperclip.
And that directive was explicit. It placed the strategic need to beat the Soviets above nearly every other concern. It was a blank check.
Operation Paperclip. You gotta love the commitment to a boring name to cover up something so insane. It's like calling a plan to rob Fort Knox Operation Filing Cabinet.
But here is the critical part. Truman's directive explicitly forbade recruiting ardent Nazis. That was the official line. Unofficially, the Joint Intelligence Objectives Agency and military intelligence had a different plan.
They systematically bypassed it. This is where the paperclips literally come in. For scientists with damning records, they just wrote a new, sanitized summary, attached it to the front of the file with a paperclip, and sent it to the State Department.
Hold on. You're telling me the security of the United States was dependent on whether or not someone at the State Department decided to look under a paperclip? That's the worst security system I've ever heard.
The secret didn't hold. The program was exposed by the press in late 1946. The War Department was forced to hold a press conference, where they admitted the program was real, but insisted they had only brought over a few nominal Nazis.
Which was a flat-out lie. They sold the public a story about harmless technicians, while actively hiding the records of high-ranking SS officers.
Nominal Nazi. That's some world-class PR spin. Oh, him. He was just Nazi-ish, Nazi-adjacent. He liked the uniforms but wasn't, into it.
And that brings us to the crown jewel of Operation Paperclip, Wernher von Braun. He was the technical director of the German Army's rocket center at Peenemünde and an undeniable genius.
He was also, undisputedly, a member of the Nazi Party and an officer in the SSC. His rank was Sturmbannführer.
What's that? In non-scary German.
It's equivalent to a major in the U.S. Army. This wasn't a low-level guy. He wore the uniform.
And those V-2 rockets were mass-produced in a place called the Mittelwerk, an underground factory that used slave labor from the Mittelbau-Dora concentration camp right next door.
It's hard to overstate the horror of that place. The statistics are sickening. More people died building the V-2 rockets than were killed by them as a weapon. We're talking an estimated 20,000 human beings.
Jesus. That's not a footnote. That's the headline. The product was less deadly than the factory that made it.
And French intelligence reports and direct survivor testimonies confirmed von Braun was there. He wasn't just at his desk, he was accused of walking through the factory, witnessing the brutal conditions, and even hand-selecting prisoners for specific jobs.
And his defense? What did he say when confronted with this?
He consistently denied it all. He claimed he was aware of the conditions, but insisted he was powerless to change anything. He was just a scientist.
I'm just a genius. I can't be expected to also be a decent human being. It's a bold HR strategy. I'll give him that.
Von Braun was the star, but he wasn't alone. Let's look at another case file, Arthur Rudolph. He was the chief operations director at Mittelwerk.
And what did his original file say before the paperclip went on?
One U.S. Army major who interrogated him described him as a 100% Nazi, dangerous type. His file was scrubbed. He was brought to America and became a project director for the Saturn V rocket program at NASA.
A dangerous type gets a job directing the moonshot. That's not just a red flag. That's a red banner the size of a football field. What was his interview like?
But the past did eventually catch up to him, right?
Decades later, the Justice Department's Office of Special Investigations, or OSI, finally cornered him in the 1980s, faced with the evidence of his command at Mittelwerk. Rudolph agreed to renounce his U.S. citizenship and left for Germany in 1984.
So he got a 40-year career and a pension before they politely asked him to leave. That's not justice. That's a severance package.
Then there is Hubertus Strughold in the U.S. He was celebrated as the father of space medicine.
But his work in Germany.
He was directly linked to some of the most horrific experiments imaginable at the Dachau concentration camp. Inmates were tortured in high-altitude pressure chambers and frozen in ice water, all to test the limits of human endurance for German pilots.
Okay, no joke for that one. That's just monstrous. They were literally torturing people to death for data points. And we called him a father of anything.
The military officials running the program weren't just turning a blind eye, they were actively complicit. We have a declassified Air Force memo from 1948 about one scientist that says, quote, "His Nazi affiliations are not a determining factor in his selection for this work."
They put it in writing. It's not a smoking gun. It's a signed confession. The mission was everything. Morality wasn't even a secondary concern.
Nazi affiliations are not a determining factor. That sounds like it's from the worst HR manual of all time. We're an equal opportunity employer, whether you're a Democrat, Republican, or committed war criminal.
And the cover-up wasn't even perfect. Some of these scientists were unbelievably brazen once they got here. In 1952, a group of paperclip scientists at Fort Monmouth in New Jersey were found to have organized a German social club.
A social club? What were they doing playing Pinnacle?
They were singing Nazi songs and had put up photos of prominent Nazi leaders on the walls.
They were what? They weren't exactly trying to blend in, were they? It's like moving to a new town and your first act is to start a "We Love Vecna fan club." Read the room, guys.
The real reckoning came much, much later. It took the Nazi War Crimes Disclosure Act of 1998 to finally declassify thousands of pages of paperclip documents.
And that's when the full extent of the cover-up was confirmed. All the lies, all the sanitized files, all the war crimes committed by men who had been celebrated for decades as American heroes. All right, let's break this down. First, the bottom line verdict. Operation Paperclip was absolutely real. It was a sanctioned, top-secret US program that brought over 1,600 German scientific personnel to America after the war.
That number is a floor. The program ran officially until 1959, but it set the precedent for decades of similar arrangements.
So, not a theory. Fact. The US government actively recruited Nazis. Got it.
Second, the nature of those recruits. Verdict. A huge number of them were not just nominal party members who signed up to keep their jobs. They were active, committed, and in some cases, high-ranking Nazis.
Wernher von Braun's rank as an SS major is an undisputed documented fact. And he was far from the only one with a file that should have disqualified him immediately under Truman's own order.
So the whole "he was just Nazi-adjacent" thing was, you're telling me, a lie. I am shocked, shocked I tell you.
Third, let's talk about the cover-up itself. Verdict. It was deliberate, systematic, and foundational to the entire operation. U.S. intelligence agencies knowingly falsified, destroyed, and concealed incriminating records.
This wasn't a few rogue agents. The Joint Intelligence Objectives Agency created a protocol for this. The paperclip wasn't an accident. It was the mechanism of a conspiracy.
It's incredible. They used the most boring piece of office equipment imaginable to launder the resumes of actual villains.
Fourth, the results. Verdict. The contributions of these scientists to the U.S. space program are undeniable. Wernher von Braun's team was the absolute backbone of NASA's rocket development. Without them, there is no Saturn V and no Apollo moon landings.
That's not an exaggeration. The team from Penum Day essentially became the Marshall Space Flight Center. They took their V2 knowledge and scaled it up for the moon.
So the moonshot had a German accent. That complicates the highlight reel, doesn't it?
Fifth, the culpability question. Verdict. While the direct personal culpability of men like von Braun in ordering atrocities is still debated by some historians, their knowing participation in a system that ran on slave labor is a historical certainty.
The "I was just a scientist" defense is, frankly, speculation. It's an alibi. We have sworn testimony placing him at the middlework. He saw what was happening.
Yeah, you don't get to claim you're just focused on the engineering when you have to step over dead bodies to get to the lab. That's not a thing.
And finally, the justification. Verdict, the official reason, denying these scientists to the Soviets, was absolutely real. But it was not the only motivation. The U.S. military was just as interested in using their expertise to get a direct offensive advantage in the Cold War.
It's the difference between a defensive strategy and an arms race. Paperclip wasn't just about keeping talent away from Moscow. It was about pointing that talent at Moscow.
So it's less "don't let the other team get the cheat codes," and more "give me the cheat codes first." Got it.
So where does this leave us? Operation Paperclip forces us to confront a classic ugly dilemma. Do the ends justify the means?
Is it acceptable to use the expertise of war criminals to potentially prevent a future, even deadlier war? In 1946, the U.S. government's answer was a quiet, but firm yes.
And we're the ones left to deal with the moral hangover. It kind of puts a different spin on one giant leap for mankind, doesn't it?
It also just demolishes the clean narrative of World War II, the simple story of good versus evil. To win the Cold War, America didn't just adopt its enemy's technology, it adopted its enemy's technologists.
We didn't just take the blueprints, we took the brains that drew them, no matter what else they had done. We took the evil and rebranded it as our evil, because we thought we needed it to survive.
It's like the end of a superhero movie, where the hero realizes the only way to win is to start using the villain's death ray. It really sours the victory parade.
And the secrecy highlights that constant tension between national security and public transparency. The decision to classify Paperclip and lie about it when it leaked had lasting consequences.
It creates a legacy of distrust. When the government gets caught in a very real conspiracy, it just makes it easier for people to believe in other, less grounded theories. You prove one cover-up is real, and suddenly everything's a cover-up.
It's the political version of finding out about Santa. Once that domino falls, you start looking sideways at the Tooth Fairy and the Easter Bunny.
And that's maybe the biggest takeaway here. History is never clean. The heroes of the American space race were, in some cases, the villains of a world war.
Their genius helped humanity reach for the stars, which is an incredible achievement. But we have to remember that genius was forged in the absolute horror of Mittelbau.
So, we got to the moon. but the ladder we used was built on skeletons. That's one hell of an asterisk.
Operation Paperclip isn't a theory about something that might have happened. It's a confirmed conspiracy. The United States government conspired to cover up the war crimes of Nazi scientists for what it saw as the greater good.
The price of winning the space race was a moral compromise that haunts American history to this day.
You can't really call it a skeleton in the closet when you strapped a rocket to the skeleton and put it on a parade float.
Next week, we go from a conspiracy that was all too real to one that feels impossible. We're asking why, in the 21st century, a growing number of people are convinced the Earth is flat. It's not about the science, it's about the psychology.
Don't miss it. It's a fascinating look at belief itself.
Look, if you want more deep looks into the uncomfortable truths that built the modern world, subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss what's next. We do this every week.